Good things don't typically happen to the Hawks. It's been 49 years since the Hawks were blessed with a number 1 pick in the NBA draft, the second longest drought of any team. In 1975, the Hawks took Hall of Famer David Thompson, who once scored 73 points in a single game, in the last game of the season while battling George Gervin for the scoring title. He never played a single minute for the Hawks. Just when it seemed the Hawks finally caught a break, Thompson chose to play for the ABA's Denver Nuggets, who had also drafted him number 1. I'm going to walk you down a very painful road full of misery so you can grasp the magnitude and importance of the Hawks receiving the number 1 pick. Because misfortune, that's how it's been for the vast majority of my lifetime as a Hawks fan.
I don't think I've seen a Hawk game this year, so I'm just going to keep it real.
Why would you watch the Hawks?
Exactly.
Now, the draft isn't an exact science, as evaluating prospects is incredibly complex and nuanced, and no franchise has a 100% hit rate. Unfortunately for the Hawks, though, we have a long history of draft misses, misfortune, and worst of all, have been part of a plethora of one-sided trades involving future superstars. The Hawks were widely expected to take Jalen Williams in the 2022 NBA draft, but OKC got him 1 pick before. For 3 seasons straight from 2018 to 2020, I endured awful basketball, as my favorite team tanked and got a top 5 pick just once. We missed on multiple wings in the past 5 to 10 years, drafting guys over players who've carved out more impactful careers. After going to great lengths to keep their interest in an intriguing young Greek prospect secret,
the Hawks committed to choosing Antetokounmpo with their first available pick on draft night, and on Giannis's trip to New York, there would be a stop, Atlanta. And the Hawks didn't want anyone in the world to know.
They told me to go by myself. I was like, no way, I'm going with my brother.
He walked into the arena, it was dark.
the Bucks selected Giannis Antetokounmpo just 2 picks before the Hawks planned to select him. They also traded away the great Bill Russell, letting his potential contract scare them away. And of course, the Luka Doncic trade, which has unfortunately linked Trey and Luka's legacies forever. Now, 2001 to 2005 was particularly rough. In 2005, the Hawks selected Marvin Williams with the 2nd pick, 2 picks before Chris Paul. In 2004, they took Josh Childress 6th, one of my favorite players growing up, but 1 pick before Luol Deng and 3 before Andre Iguodala. In a situation eerily reminiscent of this year, the Hawks had the number 3 pick of 2001, and they took Paul Gasol, and then traded him to the Grizzlies for Shareef Abdur-Rahim. Paul, of course, went on to win Rookie of the Year. He was Kobe's pick-and-roll partner in 2 championships and became one of the greatest big men ever. Shareef is from the city and was one of the best power forwards in the NBA that season before a Hawks team that needed to make drastic improvements after finishing with the worst record since moving to Atlanta. An 8-win increase from 25 wins wasn't enough to justify trading away Powell. This quote from then GM Pete Babcock perfectly encapsulates the Hawks' flawed approach to building a contending roster. We wanted to acquire talent with this draft pick that would make us the best we could be over the next 5+ years. We don't have to wait for Shareef to develop, and he has a big upside because he's only 24. The Hawks were so desperate to improve that they tried to rush their rebuild by acquiring a proven talent, even calling it another step in a 2-year rebuilding process. I detailed the painful history of my favorite team because the decades of misery might have finally all been worth it. The dozens of draft misses due to bad process and bad luck may prove to not be in vain, but instead serve as valuable lessons that the franchise must learn from. The NBA Draft's premier prize typically comes at the steep cost of sacrificing a team's dignity and revenue. If I was told the Hawks were destined to pick number 1 9 months ago, I'd assume something went horribly wrong. But for once, one of the unluckiest NBA teams, they finally got blessed. The Atlanta Hawks have a chance to completely change the direction of the franchise, starting with the decision on what to do with the number 1 pick. There are 3 paths toward contention lying before the Hawks. The first path, keeping the number 1 pick and making a selection. The second option is packaging the pick alongside other assets to bring a proven star, someone like Paul George, or trading back in the draft. Behind the third door, entering a complete rebuild by trading everyone with value for future assets and using the number 1 pick as the cornerstone for the future. We'll explore all these options, starting with the first and my favorite, keeping the number 1 pick and making a selection. As I detailed in the intro, the Hawks have a long, tormented history of absolutely terrible draft luck, from selections to the lottery itself. With that considered, I find it very hard to believe the Hawks trade the only number 1 pick we've ever had the privilege of receiving. You may have heard this draft class is much weaker than previous years, drawing some comparisons to a truly horrible 2013 draft class. But in reality, the biggest reason that this draft is considered weak is a lack of a clear-cut generational player headlining the class. But for a Hawks team that's looking to add to an exceptionally skilled franchise cornerstone, the number one pick is just as valuable as it would be for any other year for a team like the Hawks, because this draft boasts a ton of guys who profile as high-level complementary pieces. This is a draft to build with your tier 1 guys, not necessarily around the player you select. With that being said, even the worst draft classes produce at least 5 to 10 productive NBA players. 2020, 2013, 2006, and 2000 all had the same reputation, but decades later, or even just 4 years later for the 2020 draft class, and there were at least 5 to 10 guys playing meaningful minutes in impactful roles. There are 4 players I could feasibly see the Hawks selecting first overall, and I separated them into tiers based on how mad I'd be if they picked them. In my first tier, where I would celebrate by throwing something on the grill, I have just one player, Alexandre Sarr. Sarr is the next iteration of one of the most valuable yet rare archetypes in the NBA, young versatile bigs. His mobility, feel, and touch on both ends would be an absolute revelation for a Hawks team starved for defensive impact and connective offensive ability. Right now, coming into the NBA, his defensive versatility, I'm pretty confident it translates almost immediately. In the NBL, where he's playing against grown men, where he just recently turned 19, he held opponents to just 41.7% at the rim, and he was able to hold opponents to just 26.9% in ISO, with the 6th best defensive box plus minus in the NBL. He has so much mobility, and that allows him to not only just contain guards on the perimeter, but be very versatile in the way he can defend pick and rolls, whether it's showing, blitzing, hedging, or full-on switching. And then he'll combine that with elite rim protection, both straight up against defenders who are driving directly at him, and then also great sense and spacing off the ball to be a weak side rim protector. And I'm pretty confident that translates really within the first couple of minutes that he plays on the NBA floor. Offensively, he's a little bit more work, but he'll immediately be a transition threat. He runs the floor really, really well. And of course, that's a great value add next to someone like Jalen Johnson and Trae Young. His length, athleticism, and functional handle makes him a multifaceted threat on the run as well. So he can make a great defensive play or secure a rebound and immediately look to push the ball up the floor or kick the ball ahead to a guard. And he made a couple of those reads when he was in NBL this season. He has a good amount of three-point shooting upside. Now, the percentages and the volume are not there. He shot just 28.6% on 57 threes for the entirety of the season. Mind you, he did only play 18 minutes per game, and I think they only play around 30 to 35 games. And the shot needs work, not necessarily in the mechanics of it, but more so it needs to speed up, and he may need to raise his release point. When I watched some of his OTE film, he did get blocked, which doesn't necessarily make sense for someone who's 7'1" with a 7'6" or 7'7" wingspan. But really, there weren't like a ton of horrible bad misses, so I do buy his shot long term. The next thing that I'm really excited about is his dribble handoff and post playmaker flashes. In today's NBA, having a big man who can bring the ball up the court or run an offense from the top of the key into delay action or Chicago action or do these dribble handoffs, that's a huge value add. And while he didn't necessarily show a ton of ability in the NBL, his court vision and the flashes that he did make when people were cutting off ball or even cross-court passes, both in OTE and in the NBL, is really encouraging. Now, the overall process is there, and I think he can get there. But again, his ability, he's not a great screener at this point. He doesn't necessarily know how to get his body in the way on these dribble handoffs to effectively open space for his guards. But I think, if anything, learning how to screen is very teachable in the NBA. And the great thing is, Rudy Gobert said he became a great screener under Quinn Snyder. So I could expect the same for Sarr.
How much did Quinn help you become such a great screener?
And for the screen assist, I remember my second year in the league, which was Quinn's first year. He told me you should really start watching your screens, because if you're able to become a great screener, our team's going to take another level. taught me how to flip a screen and how to do all these things and how to do pin downs and all of that. And I started to love it. I started to embrace it.
The numbers, he's about 65.3% at the rim, so his rim finishing is pretty decent. He can struggle with physicality at times, especially if he gets bumped off a spot or if he can't necessarily finish with finesse. But he has good spatial awareness. He's very active cutting into space, and he finishes with touch and above the rim well. If he can dunk it, he's going to be able to dunk it. It's just more so if he has to go through somebody, I'm a little bit less confident he can do that. Another reason why I'm very, very high on his shot is that he shot 48.3% on pull-up jumpers. And he loves to get into postmans and fadeaways, and this is really the biggest indicator, along with his touch and mechanics, that he'll be able to shoot consistently. And in driving scenarios where he was driving the closeout, so out of a spot up, he shot 53.5%. So that shows a little bit of comfortability putting the ball on the floor and being able to attack his closeouts, which is, again, that pairs very well with his skill set if he's going to be picking and popping, running double drag, running delay, being able to run those fake handoffs. It all sort of meshes together really well. So Sarr entered the draft lottery with the most compelling case for number one thanks to his scarce combination of skills we just discussed, alongside his 7'1" frame with elite length and athleticism, in addition to great feel, IQ, and processing. What makes him a viable number one pick is less of any superstar upside, although I do think he can get there if the shot develops, but rather just how rare his combined skill set and tools is. There may be 5 players who share his repertoire, and if he puts it all together, he will be a unicorn among unicorns. In my second tier, which I'm calling, I'd still be pretty happy, but a little scared, I've got 2 guys, one slightly ahead of the other. As much as I individually love their potential and skill sets and believe both of them solve slightly different areas of need for the Hawks, their path to impacting and winning is a good bit more convoluted than Sarr, and they both have major swing skills to reach the level of player that would justify selecting them over Alex Sarr. The first player I have at 2A is Ron Holland. Now, Ron is a slashing two-way wing who competes incredibly hard on both ends because he's got a relentless motor. He applies a ton of pressure on the rim and gets downhill with ease. With his length and frame, he profiles as a player who can eventually be a terrifying point of attack defender while being incredibly disruptive off ball in the passing lanes. Holland's a strong finisher around the rim with highly realistic connective upside as a secondary or tertiary playmaker thanks to plenty of reps running the show for the Ignite. The shot needs a ton of work, and he'll need to be an above average shooter to reach what I feel is his potential, which is an all-star level player. When I watch Ron Holland in transition, I'm convinced he's going to be one of the most athletic players in the NBA from day one. He has ridiculous open court bursts, especially off a rebound or off a steal. It's almost like when you watch one of the best receivers in the NFL when they gap their defender and they just hit a second gear. Ron has the ability to completely outpace anybody in front of him. He's relentless getting downhill in these scenarios and pushing the pace, and he really looks like he was shot out of cannon, like he's running track, the amount of speed and burst that he has in the open court. One of my favorite aspects of his transition game is that he was the ball handler 58% of the time, which means that he has reps in a professional league playing both on and off the ball, filling lanes in transition, but also looking for guys while he's running the show. And anytime he got a steal, it was basically going to be an immediate and emphatic 2 points because he's so fast and so gifted athletically. There are multiple plays where he's 2 or 3 steps behind somebody and he's able to close that gap within seconds. He may be all the way in the corner and the defender's at the key, but by the time Ron gets to running, he's already at the other free throw line before the other guy can even realize how much space he just ate up. We mentioned his point of attack defender upside, and something that synergizes really well with his transition game is his ability to absolutely rip ball handlers. He was 6th in steal percentage in the G League at 34.7%. In one-on-one scenarios or pick and roll scenarios, he took the ball from the ball handler super frequently. He blows up handoffs really well, getting his arm in between and absolutely just converting it into 2 points. I think he's physical enough to withstand bump offs. From the couple of reps I've watched him in isolation or guys driving against the basket, he didn't necessarily get knocked back when they initiated contact. Now, his overall stance does need work in my opinion. He's not really active with his hips. His hands are, he's good with his timing, which is how he gets those steals. But one thing that definitely stands out is that he can flip his hips really quickly. And of course, because he's so gifted athletically, he can make up any sort of shifted advantage or improper footwork because he's so gifted. He was second in isolation points per possession allowed at just 0.375 points per possession. Off the ball, he's just as disruptive. You cannot throw a lazy pass around him. I mean, he jumps post-entry passes, lazy swing passes with regularity. What I really like about him as well is he could recognize mismatches and communicate defensively as the low man. There was a pick and roll where he's the low man. Instead of having the point guard switch, he then bumped him off to his man in the corner, and then when the big man came to set the screen again, he switched again, and he's just really good with his communication. What I also really love about his game is that when he makes a mistake, whether it's a turnover or he misses a shot, he's gonna bust his ass to make up for that mistake. So that could be stealing the pass in transition. That could be absolutely glassing somebody's shot 12 feet above the rim. It could be catching a lob pass out of midair and throwing it off of the defender to keep it in their possession. The man is a terrifying chase down artist. There are multiple instances this season where he absolutely destroyed somebody's shot at the rim where they should have had an open layup. Almost Anthony Edwards-like, sort of like that block he had against the Pacers and Aaron Nesmith to ice the game. Now, of course, with that length and verticality, Ron is a pretty strong rim finisher. He shot 59.8% at the rim and 66.3% in the restricted area. He has good burst off both 1 and 2 feet and ambidextrous finishing, but what's really interesting is he was better going left, driving to his left. I like that he had some really creative finishes, whether it was some finesse finishes, some absolute power finishes. He can go both through and around defenders, which I really love to see. And what's really interesting as well is he played forward in high school, so he still has some big man skills from then, where we're talking about drop steps or power dribbles, going up with a hook shot. So I can expect him to sort of be a mismatch hunter a little bit if he gets a guard on him in the NBA because he has that strength, that frame, and that skill set. When it comes to self-creation, he didn't shoot it too poorly from two-point range in ISO, around 46.9%. When you watch him play, he doesn't necessarily get into a bag super often in terms of a lot of hezzy tweens, lots of pounding the air out the ball. He knows he's faster and more athletic than pretty much anyone who's going to be guarding him, so he typically goes to a quick change of pace or a very quick crossover to just shift his defender and get to the basket with that burst and that first step. That's not to say he didn't have any nasty dribble highlights. He had a really nasty hesitation highlight, and because he's so quick with that crossover, he can really shift his defender. Now, the shot is a major concern. When you watch him shoot, he has a severe dip off the catch. If he catches the ball, he's going to bring the ball down almost near his knees before he rises back up to shoot. He doesn't really catch the ball ready to shoot either. He didn't have a single make, at least from what I saw, from standstill, meaning he was typically moving his feet off the catch, which of course adds time, which gives the defense more time to close out. He's really inconsistent in his base. Sometimes he hopped into it, sometimes he didn't move at all, but more often he would drag his right foot in and sort of narrow his base. And so he shot 23.9% on catch and shoot threes, and it seemed like he shot it better when he sort of jabbed before he shot, which is interesting as well. Off the dribble jumpers weren't much better at around 27.4%, and this is concerning because he's going to have to be able to punish defenders going under screens if he's going to want to run any sort of pick and roll reps in the NBA. Defenders were completely comfortable going under even on screens within the three-point line, and while he did make a couple of those pull-up jumpers, it wasn't consistently enough for defenses to feel concerned about going under on his pick and rolls. As a young player playing in a pro league against NBA level athletes and former NBA players and current NBA players, his decision making left a little bit to be desired, although you got to give him some leeway seeing that he was a forward and he was playing more as a primary initiator or secondary ball handler in G League Ignite. So the assist to turnover ratio wasn't the best, and he can get in trouble driving into a crowd, whether he's throwing the ball away or getting an offensive foul. And I think that's because defenses know he wants to get to the rim so badly. He doesn't necessarily have an in-between game, and he can't punish you from three. So there were times where he could have opted for a floater or a pull-up jumper, and instead it was a missed layup or a turnover or a charge. He has some really nice reads though, and for the most part, I think he saw those openings. But sometimes a live dribble pass would give him some issues in transition, but the flashes were definitely there. He also had some weird travel calls, attacking off the catch or stepping on the baseline. Ron is my favorite player in the class. I think he has the potential to be everything the Hawks could ever want in a wing, with serious two-way upside if the shot ever becomes functional. At 2B, I have modest Buzelis. Now, Buzelis is 6'10" and can dribble, pass, and shoot. That alone is a wildly intriguing player, but you add in his self-creation flashes, weak side rim protection, and finishing at the rim, and you have an uber-talented, ultra-versatile forward who can do pretty much anything you ask him to do. One of my favorite parts of his game is his pull-up shooting. He shot 47.2% on pull-up twos, and it came in a variety of different fashions. He has great footwork, great up and under moves. I really like his spin post game. He even flashed some Dirk-esque moves in there as well, and I do think this is a skill that could translate to the NBA with his length and his size. Modest also shined as a weak side rim protector in the night. Opponent shot just 49.4% at the rim against him on 83 attempts, and he had a great knack for timing when to come over for help and also making sure he wasn't fouling. And I do think that's something that would translate as well, because at 6'10", he doesn't have a plus wingspan necessarily, but he still has enough size to bother guys. Unlike Ron, he did demonstrate a good bit of off-ball value. He was 6th out of the 61 players that qualified in cuts, points per possession, and he was very timely with his cuts. He was always floating in the open space, making himself available for his guards, and he averaged 1.36 cut points per possession, which is elite. Downhill driver as well. We mentioned Ron has an ability to get downhill, but it was actually Modest who led the Ignite prospects, which includes Tyler Smith and Almanza, Ron Holland, and Modest in drive percentage at almost 20%, which is really good, especially for someone who I view more so as a forward. Now, very similar to Ron, his shooting has to be better. I do think Modest's shot is probably going to translate a little bit quicker or a little bit more effectively than Ron. He shot 34.4% on guarded threes on 61 attempts, and then shot 24.3% on unguarded threes in 37 attempts. I honestly do think that he's one of those guys that shoots better when he's not thinking about it, in terms of like where he doesn't have to methodically calculate his release, or he doesn't have too much time to think about it. And I do think with the contest he was a little bit better, which would explain why he's better on pull-up twos than he is on catch and shoot, but that definitely needs to get better. Now, while I mentioned he's a pretty decent rim finisher, his touch around the rim leaves a lot to be desired. He smoked a lot of layups. He shot 47% at the rim. That's not good enough for a 6'10" guy, especially if he's not going to be able to shoot at a high level. Again, there wasn't the best amount of spacing in the Ignite, but I think his lack of elite length, even at 6'10", caused him some issues here, and he definitely has to get better at that. Decision making somewhat similar to Ron. They actually have the exact same assist to turnover ratio at 0.89. It kind of lets you know that for both of these guys, being a primary playmaker may be out of the question, but as that connective playmaker who can just make a swing pass or make a quick read, I think they both have the capability for that. And then rebounding, his rebound percentage just wasn't good. It's at 11%. That's 27th out of the 31 players that are 6'10" or taller. And when you cut that to just forwards, so you get rid of centers, you're now looking at 11th out of 13th. And so with a team that already has a smaller guard in Trae Young, it's important that everyone else should have some positional size and versatility. And while Modest fits that frame, if he can't rebound effectively, then that's going to be an issue. Hawks fans may remember how much John Collins' rotations helped bolster the Hawks' defense once the ball got swung, and Modest has a very similar ability to assist his bigs when defending the rim, but he has that same initial positional concern that plagued John Collins, where we weren't sure if he's a 4 or 5. For Modest, is he a 3 with subpar burst and ball handling for the position? Is he a 4 whose inconsistent shot makes it tough to play him next to a traditional 5? Or is he a 5 without enough size and length to play real minutes there? The shot improving is paramount, and there is real potential of improvement here with his elite off-the-dribble shooting numbers. I think once you view him as a 4 with ball skills rather than a wing, his potential fit with the Hawks becomes tantalizing. Holland and Buzelis both have a long way to go as shooters, but they have both displayed a feverish work ethic and an encouraging desire to be the best players they could possibly be. I have no doubt that both guys have a similar ceiling to Sarr, but they have a much wider range of outcomes than Alex Sarr. If Modest's jump shot doesn't improve and he struggles guarding in space, he's much closer to Kyle Anderson light than a player closer to his high-end comp, in my opinion, like someone like Pascal Siakam. If Ron can't shoot and his court vision and decision-making doesn't develop, he's more Aaron Nesmith than Jaylen Brown. These aren't all-foul outcomes, but that would be damning for a Hawks team that needs real impact from this pick. Sarr becoming an elite defender is an outcome I'm much more sure about, and that's also a much easier sell to convince Trey to buy in on the retooling plan than taking Ron or Matas, where their time frame is a good bit murkier. Immediately after the Hawks got the number 1 pick, and in the days that followed, I honestly only considered Sarr, Buzelis, and Holland as viable options for the Hawks. But now that I've looked through the film, looked through the stats, there's one more player I would consider. And in my third tier, where honestly, if we took him number 1, I'd be furious. I'd probably crash out, but I'd at least see the vision and the process behind the pick. I have Zaccharie, Risacher. Now, he had a tumultuous season on draft boards, skyrocketing to the number 1 pick across most boards with his hot streak of 3-point shooting, but the consensus has cooled on his stock as he hit a prolonged cold stretch. In theory, a 6'10 knockdown 3-point shooter with flashes of suffocating perimeter defense sounds amazing at the number 1 pick. However, while Risacher's high-level shooting and defense gives him a relatively high floor in comparison to the rest of the class, his limitations as an overall scorer and self-creator limits his ceiling, in my opinion, especially when compared to the first 3 prospects we discussed. Risacher is an incredible shooter flat out. He shot 40.8% on catch and shoot threes on 2.8 attempts per game this season. He's somewhere around 40% over the last year and a half of basketball. He's been asked to sit in the corner the majority of possessions, so he's learned how to lift and relocate to get higher quality shots. He's also flashed some movement shooting. Now, this isn't in the sense of someone like Duncan Robinson, where they're flying off the screens and letting their momentum carry them. He's more so coming off the screens and setting his feet and scoring up, similar to someone like Michael Porter Jr. And he shot 55.6% effective field percentage off screens, but he also shot 35.7% on threes off the dribble. He's comfortable pump faking and putting the ball on the floor to relocate, and he has some really nice step backs as well.
Exceptionnel attaque, hein. Là, celle-ci, franchement.
Another thing I've learned to love about his game is that he's not just a shooter. Off the ball, he averaged 1.283 points per possession cutting and 63% on cuts directly to the basket, and he leverages his shooting gravity to cut backdoor and reverse his direction running off picks. He's a good enough athlete to catch lobs above the rim, and he had a ton of cuts directly off of inbounds plays.
Oh, il est passé, Zaccharie,
Lewis passe ligne de fond. C'est Risacher qui se fait de la place et qui marque. Il va tout changer. Pour Zaccharie, Risacher, la très bonne passe de Jaquan Lewis.
Defensively, I don't know if I would call him a lockdown defender as of right now. He is 5th in points per possession allowed off screens, and he's good at using his length to foul the shots as he chases, and he's pretty solid on ball. I don't think I would call him a stopper because he has a lack of strength versus bigger wings, and while he has good foot speed, guards can be a little bit quicker than him as well. But I do buy him as an elite team defender. He functioned really well rotating as a low man, blocking shots and blowing up passes. I think he's without a doubt a plus defender, but not necessarily a perennial all-defensive candidate, someone like Herb Jones or Jaden McDaniels, but more of a Jason Tatum elite in his team's scheme defensively defender, especially in help.
Et Rod poussera aussi pour leur maintien. Ça reste une institution du basket français. On a envie de les voir encore dans cette Betclic Elite. Ne vous inquiétez pas, messieurs. Impartialité, c'est ce qui prime avant tout chez Squeak.
Now, he's not a reliable self-creator by any means at this point. Shot just 30% on jump shot twos, 25% on off-the-dribble twos, and then had just 29 pick-and-roll possessions. And he struggles anytime he needs to put the ball on the floor for a long time, mainly because he doesn't have the strength or the handle to create separation consistently, although there are some encouraging flashes. And I'm not looking for someone this young to be an elite pick-and-roll maestro, but I would be a lot more optimistic on his scoring ability if he was able to attack closeouts well. He shot just 34.4% on drives out of spot-ups, attacking closeouts, and he was really bad at the basket. Driving to his right, he shot 35%. Driving to his left, he shot 29.4%, but he was at 40% pulling up, driving to his left out of a closeout. And a lot of those were step-back threes, but he has some beautiful mid-range jumpers mixed in as well.
Il peut en mettre, bien renversé sur l'aile gauche avec Risacher, dribble, voilà. I'm
also slightly concerned about his touch. He shot 54.9% at the rim on 133 layup attempts, and there are some wild misses where he got himself in trouble by taking bad angles, and that's a really low percentage for someone who's 6'10". Again, I do think this is strength related, and he has pretty good touch on his floaters. He shot 43.5%, and as long as he doesn't see many bodies, he can finish nicely with a diverse bag of layup packages around the rim. His issues both as a self-creator and effectiveness at the rim seem to be correlated heavily with a lack of strength. Teams will have to evaluate whether that's something he can fix down the line with his frame without taking too much away from his open court speed and movement shooting. Teams will run him off the line relentlessly if he cannot punish closeouts well. Somewhat in that same vein, he doesn't have great playmaking feel. He turned the ball over 44.8% of the time on those 29 pick and roll reps. Although majority did come early in the season, like 8 of his first 10 pick and rolls resulted in turnovers. He also has nearly double the amount of turnovers to assists at 103 turnovers to 57 assists. Now Risacher is super young. He was 18 for the majority of the season. He just turned 19. But he has a tendency to not be aware of help when driving. Maybe that's a lack of confidence in his handle, and that resulted in a ton of offensive fouls, errant passes, and turnovers. He was the ball handler 36.4% of his 176 transition possessions, and he turned the ball over 30% of the time. Good mixture of offensive fouls, loose handle / trying to be too fancy, and just missed live dribble passes while trying to run down the floor. I know my fellow Hawks fans have dreamed of MPJ playing with Trey, because I have too, but I don't necessarily see that comparison that everyone else is making with Risacher. I honestly think people just see 6'10 and light skin and they're comparing them, but MPJ as a prospect was way farther than Risacher as a scorer. He was a 3-level scorer actually. Now the combination of Risacher's shooting and defense is more than enough to warrant some consideration. He has flashes of some archetypes that are very, very desirable in today's NBA, guys like Keegan Murray, or Trey Murphy with his athleticism above the rim as well. And we've seen how well Trey and shooting lineups have destroyed other teams, and that level shooting in a 6'10 package is so intriguing next to Trey. If the Hawks truly believe he is this level shooter, the perimeter defense is real, and they believe that a lot of his issues are strength related, I can at least understand the process behind the pick, but I really wouldn't like it in the moment because I don't believe his ceiling is anywhere close to the first 3 guys we've discussed. And at the number 1 pick, you're going to have to go for guys who have a little bit higher of a ceiling, at least in my opinion. These are the 4 guys I'd be bringing in for workouts if I was functioning as the Hawks GM. If I was asked to make a top 5 board though, number 5 would be Donovan Clingan. The Hawks might as well evaluate every big who's been projected top 5, and Clingan promises to provide instant impact as a massive screener, effective play finisher, and dominant rim protector. Clingan is elite defending the rim and in pick and roll, combining great positioning with his 7'7" wingspan to compensate for somewhat of a lack of vertical athleticism while operating in drop coverage. The issue with drop coverage though is that this defensive scheme is reliant on the entire roster to be competent navigating screens and funneling defenders into the big. The Bucks are a great example of how easily drop coverage can be exploited when a team lacks competent perimeter defenders with size. Brook and Giannis are among the best drop pick and roll bigs thanks to their length, athleticism, and size, but their scheme fell apart once their roster lost guys like Drew Holiday, Javon Carter, and Dante DiVincenzo who work to get over screens and pressure ball handlers. As great as Clingan is in this coverage, those same issues would plague the Hawks as currently constructed, and it would take a massive overhaul to justify taking Clingan number 1. However, we've seen how important high-level screening is in this playoffs, from Isaiah Hartenstein's ability to free up Brunson to Gafford and Lively's roles in generating incredibly effective offense with Luka and Kyrie. Clingan is a great screener, but most importantly, an intelligent screener who flips screens and adjusts angles to create advantages for his guards. I'm higher on his offensive upside than the consensus as well, as he operated as a high post and dribble handoff hub in one of the most complicated offenses in college basketball, regularly making high-level reads and passes. I feel confident saying Clingan could replicate some of Derek Lively's initial impact as a rookie, especially next to a high-level playmaker thanks to his processing speed and overall feel. Donovan has exceptionally soft hands and displayed some feel and touch around the rim. Now, however, his range is somewhat restricted to within 5 to 7 feet of the basket as of right now. There's been some hype surrounding him adding a 3-point shot, but he's never been a great or even a good shooter on any sort of volume. The shot looked better at the combine, but I wouldn't expect for him to be a pick and pop guy within his first couple seasons. But I do think he can become a better free throw shooter and add a push shot from 10 to 12 feet, similar to what Jared Allen added this season. As much as I love his skill set, his incredibly high floor and easily projectable NBA role, as well as his fit next to Trae Young and the Hawks as a whole, I ultimately don't believe the Hawks have the personnel to maximize his defensive ability, and I don't think his ceiling is anywhere near as high as Sarr, Buzelis, Holland, or Risacher, which makes it hard for me to see any justification to select him with the number 1 pick. Immediately following the draft lottery, Alex Sarr was a player I gravitated towards as a guy I thought we should draft. After weeks of film study and prospect evaluation, I feel even more confident in that opinion. Adding Alex Sarr to Jalen Johnson and Trae Young is a match made in heaven because he complements both their games so well, but it also allows the Hawks to completely shift their team building philosophy. Taking Sarr enables the Hawks to organically build a contender, revamp their identity to focus on versatility and length, and comfortably explore their options with Clint Capella by providing cheap and impactful minutes at center, which could bring some much-needed competent wing and point-of-attack defenders to the A. Continuity is everything in today's NBA. Trae is still just 25 years old. Jalen Johnson hasn't even scratched his ceiling, and Sarr would come in at just 19 years old. These three are formidable and, most importantly, multifaceted core to build around. Sarr is more than just an ideal fit with his team. He is a physical representation of what the Hawks have been trying to build under this new front office. He aligns perfectly with the 2023 draft selections, the franchise player, and the young forward who will hold the keys one day. Now, roster transformation takes time, and most importantly, patience with Sarr as he develops. While I believe his defense will translate nearly immediately and Trae and Jalen will simplify his role offensively, he still has a way to go as he learns to effectively set screens, play out of the short roll, and adjust to the NBA. This is the most sustainable option for the Hawks. With the right complementary moves following this selection, I truly believe the Hawks are poised to contend for half a decade within 2 or 3 years. Thank you for watching, and I hope you all enjoyed exploring all the potential options for the Hawks to draft at number 1. So like I said, this is part 1 of a 3-part series. So the second part will be exploring all the trade opportunities with the number 1 pick. And as we get more intel, I'll explore that so a little bit closer to the draft. And then the third part will come after the Hawks make their official selection on draft night, because then we'll have a little bit more clarity and I can put together my full off-season plan and what I would do as a GM now that we've made that sort of distinction with the number 1 pick. So again, thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, I would really appreciate if you subscribed, and I'll see you all in part 2.